Ram, shall we start? Lovely. Good morning. Welcome to the second edition of CAMSPay Payments Insider. We are extremely excited to bring you this edition of CAMSPay Payment Insider. My name is Ravi Kiran, and I'll be the host and moderator for today's session. This is CAMSPay's endeavor to bring thought leaders from the industry to come and share some of their pearls of wisdom, some of their nuggets on hot and trendy topics. Today, we are going to be focusing on disbursement and collections using digital platforms. That's the theme for today's Payments Insider session. We have two distinguished speakers joining us today. The first speaker is Dheeraj Agarwal, who joins us from Manappuram Finance. We will be followed after this session with Shantanu Rege, who will join us from Mahindra Home Finance. All questions that you may have as audience, please post them using the chat session. The way we are going to organize these two speaker sessions today is that we will have each speaker present their opening remarks for about 7 to 10 minutes. Then we will have a Q&A session. And in the Q&A session, we will pose some of the questions that we have already received, as also some of the questions that will come live from audience. At the end of 30 minutes, we will bring the second speaker on, which is Shantanu Rege. So let me quickly introduce our audience to Dheeraj Agarwal. Dheeraj is the Senior Vice President and CEO of Manappuram Finance's two-wheeler and electric vehicle business segment. With more than 20 years of experience in the finance industry, Dheeraj has worked with Bhushan Auto Finance, Home Credit India, City Financial Consumer Finance, to name a few, prior to joining Manappuram. He brings an extensive experience in NBFCs with expertise in channel management, business development, and customer service. Welcome, Dheeraj, to CAMSPay Payments Insider. It's a privilege to have you here today. Would you like to start with your opening remarks, please?
Yeah, thanks, Ravi, and thank you for the introduction. That will be fine. And thanks, Cam, for this wonderful session. The gold loan, but we are now moving towards a digital platform, and everything from disbursements to logins for disbursements and then to collections, we are making it digitally. So talking of like at present, what COVID is causing us a temporary degrowth. However, in the long term, what I feel that it will definitely be a very robust growth, and Indian economy growth story will be supported by what I feel by the two pillars. First is an active and a robust debt market ecosystem, and the second is a healthy capital market system enabled by the high savings to the GDP. What I feel that NBFCs are playing a great role in both financial as well as in social thing. That is the reason we also feel that there will be a new change that will surface in the future. Coming to directly the topic which was asked, disbursements and the collections through a digital platform. Like everybody knows that we are like disbursals is normally happening through the digital way, but how the collections can happen digitally, that's pandemic, this current pandemic had shown us. So we are also dependent not only on the lending, reason being we are talking to all these Paytms, and for our customers are not coming to the branches to pay, so that helped us increase our reach to the customer to pay. And last year when the pandemic came, we all were very surprised that how we will collect, but it happens that we changed our old technical old thing of collections, Two-wheelers, what I also feel like industry also feels that it is impossible to collect before if we don't visit the customer's house, but we all were very different when we say. So at that time, these digital bank, digital payments collected. Now we are using all sorts of Razor Pays and then MobiKwik to pay the customers. That will help us in getting the customers EMI on time and also help us in the collections, timely collections. Now, coming off a few more technologies which has very recently launched like eNACH and mNACH. So earlier, everybody knows that only PDCs is the model, but now coming off NACH, PDCs, then NACH came, and now we all know that there is an eNACH and there is an mNACH will help us in more of a collections so that we have to hardly depend on the checks, and customers are also getting their verified signature verified. So these are all way forward which I feel will help we as an NBFCs in the collection fast. So, and one more thing is there are the customers willing to pay. If these customers are willing to pay, there is definitely will help us in collections. In addition to the skip tracing aggregation, there are some of the digital platforms which I am using, like for the AI and machine learning at a different stage. So these digital communications are beneficial in assessing the customers to resolve their debt by making the digital payment at the earliest. And AI and big analytics can assist in easy tracking of a customer behavior, their payment trends, and then institutional entities. Meanwhile, unlike legacy lead, unlike our own, what we depend on conventional means of data collection, delinquency management companies leverage unconventional digital means to harvest the troves. So that is now, it looks like a thing of a past. So that way, we are also working in the full way there, that is. And that's all for time being, and we can go to Ravi for more discussion.
Lovely. Dheeraj, thank you. Thank you for those opening remarks. You spoke about the shift from checks to the new ways of both collecting EMIs that included things like eNACH, mNACH, and so on and so forth. So you have clearly seen a shift from physical to digital, and now we are moving into a phygital era, right? Where we will have a combination, perhaps, of some things which are physical, some things which are digital. How do you see how's the management of this kind of a new composition? What kind of challenges does it pose to you to manage both the physical, the digital, and increasingly there will be a balance and an equilibrium that will get created between the two?
Yeah, right, Ravi. What we have also like talking of our eras, we have also already seen one physical and digital, and now phygital. So, like physical to digital, it looks like then there the changes happens, and now it is phygital. So, phygital makes is the use of technologies to create the digital experience, which is make it to the user friendly and the seamless for the customers. That is very, I can say that is very useful as our terms, because of talking of we as like millennials customers who are very tech savvy, and they nobody wants, like everybody sees that they don't have checks. So this will help in growing we as an NBFC, so to grow our business faster. And one more thing which phygital brings me is in the reducing my cost to a manpower. We have reduced some of the cases, like if earlier I used to be have 20 people who are presenting the checks, they are filling the checks. Now with the cover for phygital, like hardly any 2-3 peoples are there, and the companies like AMPS and all, we are using them for getting the checks presented. And in a lot, I can present 20,000 checks or 50,000 checks. That will or like eNACH, that will help me growing and reducing our cost as well.
Interesting. So how's the consumer adoption of these things as you're rolling out new ways of collection for the target segment that you address? How do you is this adoption seamless? Do you see consumers raising any objections, or is the hardship for consumers different?
Because I am dealing two type of consumers here. One is the two-wheelers and another is electric vehicles, three-wheelers. So electric vehicle three-wheelers I am finding a bit difficult. The reason being they are not tech savvy. They don't have talk of mobile phones. They are still using our old mobile phones. And then so if something can be done for those type of customers where NACH can be registered or eNACH can be registered, I don't know if is it possible or not through a normal phone. That will help us in understanding more of our customers. Like, whereas talking of because those customers are not tech savvy and they are also not maintaining the bank accounts they use already they're using the cash. So I am using the technology of Paytm where I can ask them tell the use of Paytm and deposit the cash and tell the cash. But instead of using two-wheelers, yeah, the mostly the customers are tech savvy, and this is helping us in growing more. And in two-wheelers it's a very fast approvals. Talking of other loans like home loans or talking of car loan, people can wait for a 1 day, but here I have to get it approved, and before approving I have to get the NACH and to be checked that this customer is using the same NACH, the bank account is of the same customers. So this is the way we are using this technology.
So if we were to just sort of step back and look at the bigger picture, how has your business itself changed? I mean, right from soliciting customers, then onboarding them and disbursement, followed by the tenure of the loan, and then the exit. How has your business itself changed over the last few years as digitalization has picked up?
Yeah, so Ravi, that's again a good question. That's in last 4 to 5 years, there is a huge change which happened by coming of digitalization, and what I can see earlier, the customer used to come. I am not able to, like, if I talk of my time when a customer used to come, we used to check the PAN number, and then there is hardly any way I can check the PAN number, PAN account is correct or not. And so there are lots of fraud is happening at that time. And so now the technology has changes a lot. Even a customer comes with a fraud PAN number, immediately within 3 to 4 seconds I can check whether this is a correct PAN number or not, the photo is correct. So this helped us in increasing our delinquencies. The same way, talking of with our Aadhaar card coming in, and then we can check even the license of a customer, we can check a light electricity bill of a customer, because with proper APIs. So that helped us in getting the fast approvals. That has helped us.
That's interesting. You also talked about earlier on, Dheeraj, about the usage of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and you said that you've started leveraging these technologies, these cutting-edge technologies, in debt resolution assistance. Can you, add a little bit more color in terms of how that's helping and how it is helping you move the needle?
Yeah, so if I talk of while giving a loan, I can check through mobile phones, and then I can check where this customer is living at night. So if on the basis of a mobile phone, that I can understand after evening 6 o'clock to morning 6 o'clock where this customer is staying. So that will help me in understanding that this guy is staying in that house. So that way I can test it. Other thing, what we are also doing it through a phone number, I can test that how this phone number which currently customer is using, this phone belongs to whom, name of a customer. And while we take a phone, everybody has a given one extra number, reference number we call it, that maybe my wife, my father, or my brother, or something else. So that can I can know that number as well, and this will help me in reducing my field investigation. So if that number, that phone number and address matches with that phone number, I can check it. And I also know last 6 months how this bank mobile payment has been done, so that also we can do it. And in case of two-wheelers, what happened, my 70% customers are the -1 customers where the bureau score is not there. So we cannot check what is the bureau history. So what we have started off, we have started with one company which is doing a social score. So we can check a social score of a customer. On that basis, we can check how he's using his Facebook, how his numbers. So though this is being done with the customer's consent, and we can go into the customer's mobile, and then he can check what type of SMS is coming to him, how many check bouncing SMSs are there. So this will help me in designing the my risk policies as well.
Wow. So you are leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning both for transactional stuff, as also you're using it for strategic stuff in terms of as inputs to your risk management framework as well.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. Okay. Let me sort of shift gears and try to bring in the regulatory angle here. I think in the last few years, the number of regulations that have come have also gone up manyfold, right? If you were to look at your business, how have these regulations impacted, and specifically in disbursements and collections, how have the new regulations impacted you positively or negatively?
Yeah, I think the regulations which were there is very not, I cannot say that it's a negative, but yeah, it is government regulations, so we have to follow them up. But these regulations are being followed, and we in Manappuram as also we cannot go against all these. Though some of the regulations like maintaining customer surveillance and all these things are being properly followed. And talking of some of the things which are looks like impossible earlier because of these COVID and all things, I don't think that there is any impossibility of we cannot see that it's not being followed. So we are doing that.
But do you see any specific regulation per se that has been a sort of a force multiplier or an enabler of technology of rapid growth for you?
Like one regulations which I feel is can be a degrowth factor is on the checks and all, because we are doing it with the eNACH. That will help me growth. But customers, like one banking regulations which come, we are finding it difficult that customers are not getting checks. So that will also help us in uh, getting more of a customers, but that is only his I think rest all no problem is there.
Interesting. So let me add the COVID-19 angle to this. COVID-19 to a large extent has redefined the way we work, right? Some of the things that many corporates and businesses in general, at least in the service industry, were taking small help them accelerate those into both giant strides and with a lot more speed. So today, work from home, or if I were to generalize it, work from anywhere, is more commonly accepted in most offices. That has actually brought down the need for commute itself, right? So you don't see commute today necessarily from home to office, which at least in many cities used to be for an hour and a half or 2 hours every day one way. That has gotten reduced to a large extent. Has this impacted your business for both the two-wheelers and the three-wheeler electric vehicle segment? What has COVID, or in general, if I were to ask you, how has COVID either accelerated or decelerated specific factors of your business?
Ravi, I think what that like COVID, though I cannot say that, but yeah, COVID bring a boom to us because now people are avoiding traveling in the trains. Like I live in Mumbai, so Mumbai trains are still not very active. And though during, I still remember last 2 years, people avoid going to the autos, and people avoid getting the buses, and so everybody start purchasing two-wheelers. And with the coming of so that is the reason there are few more startup which come in, which started giving vehicle on rent. So that helped us, that two-wheelers, and the rent is not very high. It is as 3,000 to 3,500 rupees a month, and that is equivalent to their uh, travel by bus daily, and they can travel faster. So there are many OEMs, like many companies as well, with setup. And two-wheelers is actually boom. Like cars is actually for them, I cannot say it is for everybody, but two-wheelers is every time a must. Every house, even we have homes to take a two-wheelers is there. And now coming over with the electric vehicles, so these electric vehicles are growing up faster, so that will help me in growing.
That's interesting. In fact, we had done some bit of a survey a couple of years back, and our finding was that there was a hesitancy from financiers to finance electric vehicle purchase. We could not actually dig deeper to understand what were the reasons for hesitancy, but I'm talking about something which is about 2 years back. So has the financing of electric vehicles now picked up? Is that now mainstream, or are there any difficulties that you see for electric vehicle financing, which is different from conventional vehicle financing?
Yeah, Ravi, you are right. Like mostly no NBFCs are hesitate in financing NBFs like to electric vehicles. But we all know electric vehicle is the future, and that is the reason we also started financing this. But this, whenever anybody wants to finance this product, you should be make sure that we should get the service from this. Now there are more than 200 OEMs who are developing electric vehicles, and as per the trend, this will go on increasing, because everything they are coming, bringing it from China and building it in India. So whenever we finance a product, what we are doing, we are checking their facilities, and we are using them for our work. And we also involve them in our sales as well as in our collections as well. We tell them that anything, if they find it difficult, we will repossess that two-wheelers or three-wheelers and bring back to you. So that will help me in refinancing that product. So that is the reason what we have financed. Yeah, before COVID it was not very bad, but after COVID also, when we started the business, it is growing fine with it. So we don't find any difficulty in doing it. And as per the figure, this industry will grow to at a 36 CAGR this for next year.
Wow, wow. There is a question from the audience, and I'll just take that up, and I'll probably generalize that. How do you see the customer consent architecture growing as far as usage of AI and so on and so forth is concerned? How do you see this customer consent architecture itself? And because right now, if you look at regulations, both at the government level and at the regulator level, there is quite a bit of focus around customer consent that has picked up steam over the last few years. At the same time, leveraging technologies like AI and ML give you a lot of tools today that can help you, in some sense, get information about customers that can be very useful to you from a business standpoint, but it necessarily requires consent from the customer before you can leverage it. So how do you see these two streams really converging? There's a question from the audience which says, does your usage of AI to access customer phones satisfy the customer data privacy norms from a regulatory standpoint?
Yeah. So that is what I have already tell, that everything what we take, we use first, we are taking the customer consent, that we are like, there's an OTP which goes to the customers and which says that he is agreeing for it, and that is, we are not using any customer privacy and all. We are just checking. And even though the technology which the company which we are using for checking, they have a tie-up with telephone operators for understanding how it is. So all these things, apart from us, there are other big banks are also using this, and everything what we have taken it with a full precaution.
Interesting. So is your main way of growing your business by tying up with OEMs and working with dealers and distributors at the ground level, or do you use somewhat of a different kind of a business growth strategy? Because this two-wheeler financing is a pretty well penetrated segment. You have got to take on well-established banks with a lot of branches and well-established OEMs with which have got strategic tie-ups with banks at a working capital level and so on and so forth. So if you were to think about Manappuram's sort of USP in addressing this market segment, how do you look at that?
Yeah, there will be two things what we are doing. Though you are very right in that this is basically a relationship based business, and we are placing those guys which are dealer oriented. So because in this case, what happened, dealer is only ready to take those type of are like sales guys or even the financer guys who sits at the showroom from the ages. So one time he is now sitting with Manappuram. Earlier he used to sit with the Hero, and then he used to sit with the HDFC. So why this dealer does it? Dealer is doing this because he is finding it comfortable with those guys. So if I hire that guy, that is for sure we can get it. And another thing, why the dealer will support us is on the basis of the fast deliveries, and then on the basis of the fast approvals, and disbursal should be also fast. So in all these 2-3 things, I am trying to cope with the competitors as well. And other part is we are actually we have our own, the advantage is Manappuram has is we have our own branches. So through our own branch also we can source the customers, and mostly the gold loan customers are like the two-wheelers customers as well. So we can help them in getting the two-wheelers. So this way the dealer will support us, because now the sales is mostly there are so many people who are from, like if I go to any big dealer of a two-wheeler, I will definitely find 7 to 8 financiers who are sitting there. So but the sales is same, the dealer is selling 100, and then also if I enter, then also he will sell 100. So dealer is asking us, whenever you are coming to my showroom, what USP you are bringing in. So one USP is this, which will help us in. And another USP which we can, I think we as a gold loan can do is gold backed two-wheeler, which is, so even the bad bureau customers, we are giving a loans on the basis of the gold. They can deposit gold in my Manappuram branch, and then take as a security deposit. Yeah.
Payments. India decade has many different payments. In fact, look at NPCI's growth in UPI. It's been really growing by leaps and bounds with every passing day and week. Amongst all the different payment modes, what is the payment mode that really works for you from a digital payment standpoint? And if you were to really look ahead for the next say 3 to 5 years, which payment mode do you feel most optimistic about in terms of something that will make a difference to your business from a disbursement and collections perspective?
Good questions, Ravi. The digital payments, what I feel have evolved tremendously over the past few years. So raising a question, where will the digital payment technology take us in the future? As more consumers become tech savvy, the opportunities are endless, and especially we are only just now tapping the unprecedented potential from the growth. So smartphones is basically is penetration with a 3.2 million smartphone user in 2020. against a global population of near about 7.5 million. Or so what I feel that mobile wallet adoption rose to can be a big boost on these digital payments. And then what is my understanding, digital payment will grow at a rapid pace over the next few years, and which can account for near about 73 to 74% of the payments in India by approximately by next 25. And the cash and the checks and the other payment alternatives, which occur only 28% as per the recent report which I was reading, will definitely go down.
Lovely. Let me ask you my last question, Dheeraj. You've been working with CAMSPay over the last few years. What has been your experience working with CAMSPay for your collections requirements?
Yeah, I frankly speaking, very good. We have a very good experience, though we are using some of the other technologies. So we are now moving and shifting to CAMS as well. And like your daily interaction, or what we people feel, the CAMS, like if we find something difficulty, they used to get it resolved, and your eNACH and your mNACH, and then facility which we are using it finds there is always a niche different with others, your competitors. I think we are finding it very good.
Thank you, Dheeraj. Thank you so much for such a candid discussion on various things that are happening at the two-wheeler industry, at Manappuram, and your interaction and the way you see the future itself. Let me shift gears and bring on board our second guest speaker. Our second speaker is Shantanu Rege. Shantanu graduated with BTech in electrical engineering from IIT Bombay in 2006. After stints in management consulting with McKinsey and with private equity with Blackstone in Mumbai, Shantanu secured an MBA from Harvard Business School and joined the Mahindra Group in 2012. In 2016, he moved to his current role as the Chief Operating Officer of Mahindra Rural Housing Finance Limited, a unique business that is catering to the bottom of the pyramid needs for housing. Shantanu is a passionate Indophile. He has wide interests in that span design, education, economics, and politics. So you can't get a more rounded personality. He seems to have interests in everything that is right now going on amidst us. Shantanu, welcome to CAMSPay Payments Insider. It's such a joy to have you with us. Shantanu has a short presentation to start with. Instead of an opening remarks, he's got a short presentation. And his presentation is titled The New Normal for Lenders. We'll start with that. Over to you, Shantanu.
Thank you so much, Ravi. I'd request someone from the CAMSPay team to load the presentation so that we can go through it.
Sure. Ram, can we have the presentation, please?
Okay. If you would like me to present, I can do that as well.
Oh, if you've got it ready, please go ahead. You can share your screen and start.
Okay,
you have.
Let me try. Is the screen visible?
No.
No?
Not yet. We are still seeing you on the camera.
Okay.
I think our team will just load your presentation. If you want to just start with the thing, we'll get the presentation loaded.
Okay. I think, okay. Was that me who was presenting, or has that come from the CAMS team?
The presentation is on.
Okay. Great. So thank you so much. Can we have the next slide, please? So I just wanted to set the context. The traditional approach, between banks and NBFCs is typically, if you look at the good old days, traditional banks used to focus on large ticket corporate lending, typically longer tenor products with very tight policies, very few deviations, and typically corporate or rate sensitive customers, which you could classify as super prime or prime customers. This is the traditional banks. And if you could just click next, the traditional NBFCs were kind of the opposite of banks, right? Retail, small lending, typically shorter tenors, more flexibility in policies, deviations. So kind of focused on underserved, unserved customers, typically what you would call as subprime, right? And if you look at the lending value chain, right, from origination, assessment, disbursement, collections, there were opportunities to partner or to develop skill sets within each. So if you could just click on the next animation. With an origination, for example, you could, even today, and these are very topical, you can partner with online platforms. The mood of the day is to generate leads from some originator, and you assess them, you do the risk analysis. As far as assessment is concerned, I believe Dheeraj also mentioned how there are partners who can help you with verifications, with doing some of the things around analytics, credit scoring, disbursement. Frankly, we've moved entirely away from check-based disbursements to NEFT. So disbursing directly into the customer's account, UPI, wallets, e-rupee, which is the new announcement which happened, are all innovations which are happening. On the part of collections, obviously, again, Dheeraj mentioned UPI, BBPS. Typically, NBFCs, banks have both used call centers. We are very big in partnering with other players in the ecosystem. And when it comes to the harder collections, which one might call recovery, you typically use agencies, call center, you might employ litigation or asset reconstruction companies. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. But if you see more recently, right, I mean, the lending landscape, especially with the introduction of fintechs and how many of them have become unicorns, there's a lot of smaller players, partners, if you will, who are entering, especially on the lending side, right? So if you see most of the unicorns or fintechs which are there, they are enabling you to lend, right? By either B2C, B2B, there are P2P, peer-to-peer lenders who will take the risk themselves. Platforms which are bringing in the latest technologies to enable financiers to lend, which is great. But that is where I think the regulator comes in. So if we go to the next slide, if you just were to look at the credit landscape, right? I'm just waiting for the slide to come on. Yeah, so if you look at the landscape, there is the borrower, there is the lender, and you kind of have to decide, how do you do a risk assessment and a mitigation so that you can price the risk correctly. And to do that, you will have partners who will help in bringing process efficiency, effectiveness. But overseeing all of this is the regulator to make sure that, which party is doing what, and are they still doing it in the broader interests of the stability of the financial system. So in a bank or an NBFC, you might have everything which is outside the borrower being one agency, which is the bank itself or the NBFC itself. Or in peer-to-peer lending, for example, they are only doing the risk assessment and the mitigation part. The lender is a peer who's lending to a borrower. So I think fintechs are basically disaggregating this ecosystem. But the one thing which I feel, and especially in the rural context, where the money really is not so much in the lending, but is more on the collections and recovery, right? It is, especially in rural India, it is very, very easy to lend. There will be enough credit-starved customers who want the money for a productive asset use. But do you have the capability to collect and recover from these customers? That's the bigger question. So coming to the regulator, if you can go to the next slide, I think broadly the regulator performs, two functions. And there have been recent developments on both. One is consumer rights and convenience, where you have the Fair Practice Code, KYC guidelines. There's talk about extending the ombudsman for banks to NBFCs. The RBI also announced COVID-19 relief measures. All of these are what, as a financier, you would say, add to your compliance burden, but they are keeping the customer at the center and saying, how do we protect his rights, right? The second role, I think, is from the regulator standpoint, is how do you manage systemic risk, right? The entire ecosystem of financing in the country. And that is why I think increasingly there's a desire on the regulators' part to harmonize banking regulations with those of NBFCs. So especially the large NBFCs are kind of treated almost on par with banks. There have been risk-based internal audit. There are kind of caps on how much net NPA you can have before you can declare a dividend, etc. It's also introduced the liquidity risk management so that you have sufficient capital buffers. So in the case of any major systemic risk event, the NBFCs, especially the large NBFCs, are sufficiently well protected. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So if you, as we do this, and as a lender, right? I kind of think of lenders basically as credit risk managers, right? That's basically what a lender is supposed to do. So there are questions around the business model itself, with the introduction of so many fintechs and the entire credit ecosystem getting disaggregated. So the first question which I think anyone should ask if you're a credit risk manager is, what do you want to do? Where in that entire credit ecosystem are you playing? And what is your right to win, right? Why should you succeed where everyone else will not or may not, right? And the key thing which in an environment where you're flush with liquidity, that sometimes gets missed is, are you pricing the risk correctly, right? Are you getting sufficient returns on the risk that you are taking? To do this, you may not have all the skill sets in hand, which is why you need partnerships, right? And those are questions that I've put up, which are being discussed in all teams, in all board meetings, saying what are the kind of delivery models that your customer needs? How are you leveraging data and emerging digital technologies? Who do you partner with? Why? What skill sets does he bring? And how are you going through the process of selecting the right partner? And we obviously partnered with the likes of CAMSPay, etc. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about these questions and how Mahindra Home Finance looks at it. Thank you. That's it.
Shantanu, thank you. That was a very brief, but packed with a lot of provoking questions. And in fact, I will use one of the questions that you put out there as my very first question. You said in the questions to consider, I like the positioning that you did, saying lenders are credit risk managers. But you also said that everyone has got to think about why they will succeed where others may not. So if I were to just flip that question and ask, why will Mahindra Rural Housing Finance succeed in rural affordable housing finance where others may not? Many have tried. It is a pretty well-competed segment. How would you look at this? How would you look at Mahindra Rural Housing Finance's positioning itself?
Sure. Very good question. We think about this, every day. The fact is, as a housing finance company, we do secured lending. So the house that a customer is staying in will be mortgaged to us, right? And the word girvi rakhna is kind of an anathema in rural India. Nobody wants to do anything, keep any of their assets girvi somewhere else. More because there is not that much confidence that the other side, the counterparty, will honor its commitment, will be fair in dealing in its dealings with the consumer, will ensure that when the property has or the security has to be released, whether it will be released on time or not. So that is why there is apprehension. Gold loan companies have overcome that. When it comes to the house, there is the typical concept of the village sahukar, where you keep your house girvi and you borrow against it. But apart from that, nobody's been able to build the trust for a rural consumer that you have the security that if you keep
Shantanu, we lost you for a few seconds. You may
Sure.
want to just, if you don't mind, we lost you. The connection was down. So
Okay.
maybe for the last 30 seconds, if you can repeat
So I'm
what you
saying
said.
there, in rural India, there is an anathema towards keeping anything girvi, and especially if you're keeping your house as mortgaged, which is another form of keeping it girvi, is you need to have that trust that if you honor your commitment as a consumer, I pay on time, then I will not be charged exorbitant sums, and my property will be released from that. I mean, the security will be released, right? Not many organizations have been able to build that level of trust, because the house, end of the day, is the biggest asset which any rural consumer owns. That is where the strong brand loyalty that the Mahindra Group in general has with rural consumers, where Mahindra is a very established brand. They like being associated with that brand, and it engenders trust. Through by its very name, right? This is where I mean, actually, I think it is drawing the right kind of balance between exerting pressure on consumer versus understanding some of his genuine compulsions. If you have a farmer who had a bad harvest or having a flood, how much do you push as far as the recovery is concerned versus you understand that, okay, this is a natural phenomena which have impacted his cash flows, and therefore your collections will get impacted. Now, it's a very slippery line, right? You have a responsibility to shareholders to make sure that you push as hard as you can, but you don't push so hard that the consumer breaks and the trust or the loyalty or the relationship that you enjoy with him is broken in perpetuity, right? So the biggest thing I think is the Mahindra brand. But that said, I would be delighted to have more competition. I think it is a huge market, rural housing finance, very little, and we encourage to enter trust with those consumers, because we will never be able to have demand.
Rural growing more and more differentiate from one lender versus the other. So I'd like to again see, you talked about brand Mahindra itself engendering trust. So there is, of course, that as the foundation for Mahindra Home Finance. But on top of that, how do you look at risk-based pricing? Equally, you talked about fintechs being a disaggregator of the lending ecosystem itself. So is your risk-based pricing also in some ways getting disaggregated, or is risk-based pricing in some sense the central and core of what Mahindra Home Finance stands for and differentiates itself with?
Right. I wouldn't say that debating and asking the question as to whether you're pricing the risk correctly. It is very easy in rural India to lend. Again, I will repeat something. I think just like trying to be very topical, just like Afghanistan has been the graveyard of empires, rural India very often can be the graveyard for lenders, right? Because if you want to lend there, people will just not ask at what rate. They will say how much, right? How much can you lend me? So you have to be very finicky in terms of, which customer are you lending? We are very particular about end use. We don't do LAP, we don't do personal loans. We want to be very sure that if it is a new customer, we know where the final money is going. Just like Dheeraj mentioned, most of our customers are new to credit, -1 CIBIL, and therefore we've deployed our own internal credit scoring models, because we have the history of customers with a certain demographic, with a certain income profile, certain land holding, etc., etc. and we've been able to identify what is the right interest rate that they should be given to, and at least a go no go decision, right? And we are constantly on the lookout for partners who can help improve that credit scoring based on external data, internal data, telecom data, geography data, any kind of data that we get. We would always want to improve that credit scoring, because that ultimately is going to decide as to whether we are pricing the risk correctly. We are very focused on profitability. So our interest rates, we don't compete on rate. We compete more on relationships, on ability to serve, turnaround time. Those are the differentiators. It is not rate as far as we are concerned.
So perhaps I'll just take that as a cue for my next question. We don't hear too much in the mainstream media about the impact of COVID-19.
The perils of working from home. There's a bell, so I'll just have to get it.
Please. In the meantime, if there are any questions from the audience, please use the Q&A section of the AirMeet chat and put your questions. We will take those questions up as well.
Sorry, Ravi. Go ahead.
Okay, Shantanu, you're back. No problem at all. So we don't hear too much about the impact of COVID-19 on rural India. There's a lot more focus in the mainstream media about urban India, metro India, but not as much on rural India. If you were to think about your business, since you're focused on rural India, how has COVID-19 shaped or reshaped both the rural India and specifically the affordable housing finance segment in rural India? I'm just giving you two questions there.
So Ravi, first thing, I think the first wave, luckily for most of us, kind of was largely an urban phenomenon, urban, maybe semi-urban, but largely evaded rural India, right? So there were lockdowns, etc., but it did not, the impact really wasn't felt as much or as hard on the rural side. The second wave, unfortunately, is a very different story. I think Q1, most organizations which have a rural presence, especially on the lending side, and their financial results will speak for themselves. It was not because of any lack of effort, but I think it really did hit home. We've seen, customers being genuinely scared about their livelihoods. A lot of the farmers were not able to go to the mandis to sell their crop, or even if they have cash, because it kind of hit home, and you saw people in your surroundings getting impacted. There was a desire, there was kind of a risk to, or a desire to kind of keep cash as a safety buffer, right? So even if customers who had cash would say, but what might happen, tomorrow if somebody in the family is impacted with COVID, uske ilaj ke liye paisa rakhna zaruri hai. So they would be, that would take precedence over, repaying your loan obligations, etc. And that's again where as I mentioned, you have to manage that expectation. That the customer has cash, but is it a genuine thing that he's saying that he, needs to keep a buffer for his, more pressing needs? I think most rural financiers have managed it well. Yes, it has impacted their financials, but as things return to normalcy, and things are increasingly return to normalcy, I think Q2, Q3, their financials will also show the recovery, which is very much expected as these consumers become more confident in their repayment ability and the fact that there is no third wave, etc. Right? So as far as from a business model standpoint, because we were limited from travel, and we couldn't really, about 80% of our collections used to be cash, actually going to the customer and collecting cash, right? But right from March 2020, we were kind of forced to figure out ways that we can manage collections without our employee going and meeting the consumer, right? So the old adage, necessity is the mother of invention, actually came true. And that is where, partners like CAMS, we started reaching out to fintechs and saying, how can you enable collections? And it's not just, UPI or enablement on UPI. our consumer will not, just because you send him a link through an automated script, he's not necessarily going to press that link and follow the process by which he makes the payment. So you had to educate him about how to do it. There were also apprehensions because a lot of these fraudsters came into the picture, and a lot of UPI links started getting sent out, and the money never went where it was intended. So I think the model, especially that we believe is something which will be prevalent, it will be the more assisted digital. It will not be pure digital as is the case in urban India, but some sort of assisted digital, and we've kind of embarked on that journey, ever since March 2020.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So while on this particular point about the changes to your business model, is now vaccination a part of your credit scoring engine as well? Because that will really tell you whether, how resilient is a person against COVID-19. Is that now a factor in your credit scoring engine?
I mean, it's a good point, Ravi. But the challenge with credit scoring models is they need to be given some time to showcase their effectiveness, right? So unless you are able to draw a correlation between vaccination and some metric of delinquency, which will take time, right? So we've, as of now, not put vaccination as a metric within our credit scoring, but it's a valid point. We've certainly made sure that we are pushing all our employees at least to get 100% vaccinated. We are about 40-50% there, but I think if a rural consumer is getting vaccinated, he must be a lot more enlightened, and therefore a lot more aware about the need and the safety precautions, etc. So he should, in all probability, get a better credit score.
That's interesting. Okay. On that, let me just change gears. One of the points you made earlier, Shantanu, is that in rural India, making money for lenders is more dependent on collections and recovery, not in lending itself. That was a point that you made. So collections and recovery becoming the key, perhaps prior to COVID-19 meant more feet on street, more coverage, and so on and so forth. And you were just alluding to earlier about how you're moving not to pure digital, but assisted digital being the key to really growing in the rural segment. So how have partnerships helped you here as far as because it is not perhaps the most practical way to do everything on your own?
Sure. I mean, just to make it simpler for the audience, I would categorize the rural customers. All our customers have a bank account. So because our disbursement through NEFT goes into a bank, right? So the absence of a bank account is not the reason why they are not paying digitally, but it is more of a customer segmentation kind of issue. So in the interest of simplicity, I think there are three kind of stereotypes of customers that we deal with. There is let us say about 20% of the population you could call as the progressive pradhan, right? Who likes to use digital modes, who's aware about UPI, who's got a son in the family who's the kind of early adopter when it comes to technology, right? About 60% of the consumer base, I would say, would be cautious Kamla, right? He or she can use digital modes, but there is an aversion. There is that comfort is not there. Will somebody take my money away? If I do it once, can next time they just take money out of my bank account? They like the relationship of going and giving it to someone and getting a receipt, which can be shown in posterity that, see, I've made the money, I got something in return. And the SMS just isn't enough for that individual, right? And the third category, maybe around another 20 odd percent, would be kind of the dramebaz darzi, right? Who's always finding an excuse not to pay, right? He will say, main idhar hi hai na, main kidhar ja raha hai, aaj paisa nahi hai, kal aa jao, that kind of an individual, where you will always need a physical follow-up. How many ever SMSs or UPI collect requests you send him, he is never going to pay through those modes, just because that's kind of the norm. Now, so for each of these three segments, there are different partnerships, right? So for the progressive Pradhan, you want to push him to, let us say, eNACH, right? Would you be able to partner with someone and say, you don't even have to send money through UPI, you just register through eNACH, and it's safe, we'll pull the money out without this complication of signature mismatches, etc. For the cautious Kamla, it would be more about trying to find a partner where it is you kind of convert. Not you don't want to kind of move this segment to digital. They may not move to digital, but can they at least move to what we call as non-field? So our employee doesn't have to go and collect money from this individual. Can this individual go and deposit money at, let us say, a CSC center or an India post office or a Fino center? So at least our effort in collecting is minimized. There is a cost efficiency in it, and the customer's concerns are also addressed. And the third category would then be, some of the things that Dheeraj also mentioned. Do you do on-off scoring, see if he's paying some other lender and not paying you? Do you do skip tracing, etc., etc.? But more the physical part where I don't think technology or partnerships can help as much. But the aim would be to push the 60% of cautious Kamlas into the 20% bucket of the progressive Pradhans. And if you are able to create that transition, it's helpful for the customer, it's helpful for the organization. It's a win-win all around.
I have one question. Coincidentally, we were talking of cautious Kamla, and there is my good friend Kamla who has asked you a question. And the question goes like this. Do you believe your risk scoring model has brought first-time borrowers with nearly no credit history or no assets like land to enable them to buy or build a home?
On the rural side, we operate in two verticals, rural and affordable housing. In rural India, because we do a mortgage, invariably the customer will have land. He will have a house. It might be a kacha house which is being converted into a pakka house, or it might be an extension, improvement kind of loan. The ticket size is typically very small, a lakh, lakh and a half, 2 lakhs thereabouts, which is sufficient for that segment. So the existence of some property document to prove his ownership so that the mortgage can be converted, can be given or can be executed is necessary. But yes, even today, and we keep testing, if in rural housing, these customers who are taking the 2 lakh ticket size loan, are they credit worthy? How many of them, have a credit score? And we've consistently seen that percentage of new to credit customers is as high as, similar to what Dheeraj said, about 70% odd. So ours is invariably the first loan that they've taken. And if they are able to maintain a good repayment track record, we are essentially, making them credit worthy for a host of other financiers to also lend to them by virtue of the home loan track record.
Great. Shantanu, my last question. What has been your experience with CAMSPay?
So frankly, wonderful. We were talking with CAMSPay for about two odd years, but the real impetus, I would say, came during March 2020, where we really needed to push the envelope on identifying innovations and partners that we've worked with who can help us collect when we can't go out physically, right? So the UPI or the SMS indent solution, where our employee from his mobile phone could send an SMS to the consumer and say, "Ki, I know, this is something you can trust because I've just sent it right now, and you will get it on your SMS now, on your phone now, even if it is." There might be some delays, but we were able to say, I'm sending you a link now, press on that link, and you are directed to a page where you can make the transfer, assuming you have the money with you. That is something that we went to market with, and we saw very strong adoption of that solution, because every employee felt that he was contributing. By him sending the link, he was doing the collections and not some system which was sending the SMSs on their own. The other reason why we look forward to working with CAMS is you work with so many other financial institutions, it is always important to have some kind of a periscope into what others are doing, what regulations are happening, and a large institutional player like CAMS, which is also trying to stay abreast of all the latest innovations. If they have ideas which can help us improve our own processes, and the three segments that I mentioned, anything which is catering to them, that we can adopt, it kind of feeds back to us because of that relationship.
Lovely. Shantanu, thank you so much for sharing your pearls of wisdom. In fact, I'd like to thank both my guest speakers, Dheeraj Agarwal from Manappuram Finance and Shantanu Rege from Mahindra Rural Housing Finance for their time and for sharing their experiences of running their respective businesses. To the audience, thank you so much for having listened to this session and for the wonderful questions. If you'd want to know more about CAMSPay, how CAMSPay can be of help to you, please visit www.camspay.com. We will be very happy to be of assistance to your payment requirements. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Stay safe. Shantanu, Dheeraj, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ravi. Thanks, Shantanu. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all for joining this. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.